They were icons, pioneers, and legends, shining stars whose talent captivated the world, but whose lives were cut short by a crisis shrouded in fear and silence. In a time when AIDS carried deep stigma, these celebrities faced the unimaginable with courage, grace, and often heartbreaking secrecy. Some used their platforms to raise awareness, while others quietly fought their battles behind closed doors. But all of them left behind more than tragedy. They left legacies that changed how we talk about love, illness, and identity. This is a tribute to the most famous stars whose lives were forever shaped by the AIDS epidemic. Freddie Mercury wasn't just the lead singer of Queen. He was a phenomenon, a force of nature who turned every stage into a battleground of passion, energy, and soul. With hits like Bohemian Rhapsody, We Are the Champions, and Somebody to Love, Freddie redefined what it meant to be a rock star. He wasn't just performing, he was living out loud, unapologetically flamboyant, fiercely talented, and utterly unforgettable. But behind the dazzling stage presence was a man guarding a painful secret. In 1987, Freddie was diagnosed with HIV, at a time when the world still whispered the word AIDS in fear. He chose silence, not out of shame, but out of defiance. He kept creating, recording, and performing, refusing to let illness define him. His final appearance in Queen's music video, These Are the Days of Our Lives, showed a thinner, fragile Freddie, but the fire in his eyes still burned. On November 23, 1991, he released a statement confirming he had AIDS. Just 24 hours later, he was gone. But Freddie didn't vanish, he became immortal. Through his voice, his legacy, and the Mercury Phoenix Trust, he continues to ignite hearts and fight for those still silenced by stigma. Rock Hudson was the epitome of Hollywood's golden age, tall, handsome, and effortlessly charming. He starred in classics like Giant, Magnificent Obsession, and Pillow Talk, captivating audiences with his clean-cut image and magnetic presence. To the public, he was the ideal leading man, the kind every woman dreamed of and every man admired. But behind the studio-engineered smiles and picture-perfect romances was a truth too dangerous to reveal. Hudson was gay, forced to live in secrecy under the weight of 1950s America and a ruthless entertainment industry. For decades, he maintained the illusion. Then came 1985. Frail and visibly ill, Hudson could no longer hide. When his publicist confirmed he had AIDS, it sent shockwaves through Hollywood and beyond. He became the first major celebrity to put a face to a disease shrouded in silence and stigma. His revelation changed everything. Suddenly, AIDS wasn't just a headline, it was real. It had a name, a face, a heartbreak behind it. 3 months later, on October 2nd, Rock Hudson died at 59. But in his final act, he did what even his greatest roles couldn't. He forced the world to listen. His truth cracked the silence wide open, and history never looked away again. Brad Davis wasn't just an actor, he was a wildfire on screen. With piercing eyes and raw intensity, he became a breakout star in Midnight Express, earning a Golden Globe and the kind of fame reserved for Hollywood's brightest. But behind the fame, Davis lived a life marked by pain, secrecy, and silent battles. In 1985, a single blood test changed everything. He was HIV positive. In an era when such a diagnosis could end a career overnight, Davis kept his truth hidden from the world. He kept working, kept pushing, kept fighting through the fear, stigma, and the slow decline of his health. His silence wasn't weakness, it was survival in an unforgiving industry. But by 1991, the illness had taken its toll. His body was failing, but his spirit remained unbreakable. Refusing to surrender to the agony of AIDS, Davis made the most controversial and courageous choice of all: assisted death. With the support of his wife, he exited life on his own terms. No pity, no spotlight, just control. Brad Davis died at 41, but his final act was more powerful than any performance. It was a message: dignity, even in death, is worth fighting for. To millions of viewers, Robert Reed was the perfect father, kind, patient, and unwavering. As Mike Brady on The Brady Bunch, he became America's favorite TV dad, embodying the wholesome values of a suburban dream. But behind the iconic role and polished smile was a truth Reed kept locked away from the world. Born John Robert Reitz Jr., he was a classically trained actor with a passion for Shakespeare and serious drama, but it was sitcom fame that made him a household name. Off-screen, however, Reed lived a double life. He was a gay man in an era when being openly out could destroy a career. So he hid, quietly, respectfully, and painfully. Even while mentoring the young cast with care and discipline, he carried the burden of silence. In 1992, Reed died from colon cancer at just 59. Only afterward was it revealed that he was HIV positive. The official cause of death was cancer, but the truth rippled through Hollywood. The man who portrayed the model father had been living with a secret he couldn't safely share. In death, Robert Reed reminded the world that even the most beloved faces can carry invisible battles. And that silence, too, has a cost. Denholm Elliott was never the loudest man in the room, but he was often the most unforgettable. A master of nuance and wit, he lit up the screen in every role he played, from the charmingly bumbling Marcus Brody in Indiana Jones to the tender Mr. Emerson in A Room with a View. He wasn't a typical leading man, but he didn't need to be. Elliott had that rare gift. He could make a supporting role the soul of the story. With over 125 film and TV credits, his career was defined by subtle brilliance and quiet authenticity. Off-screen, Elliott was known for his eccentric humor and warmth, a true gentleman of the arts. But in 1987, he was diagnosed with HIV. At a time when the stigma was still crushing, he chose to remain silent about his illness. Not out of shame, but out of a desire to keep working, keep living, keep creating. He never made his diagnosis his identity. He simply kept showing up, gracefully, professionally, powerfully. In 1992, AIDS-related tuberculosis claimed his life at the age of 70. Today, his legacy lives on not just in film, but in the quiet courage of a man who let his work speak louder than his pain. Keith Haring didn't need a canvas. He had the streets. Armed with chalk, neon colors, and unstoppable energy, he turned New York's subways and walls into living declarations of joy, rebellion, and truth. His bold figures, radiant babies, and pulsating lines weren't just art. They were movement, rhythm, protest. Born in Pennsylvania in 1958, Haring exploded onto the 1980s art scene with a vision that spoke to everyone, not just critics, but kids, commuters, dreamers. His style was unmistakable, his message clear: love loudly, live freely, and never back down. In 1987, at the height of his fame, Haring was diagnosed with HIV. But instead of retreating, he leaned in. He used his growing platform to fight the stigma surrounding AIDS, founding the Keith Haring Foundation to fund awareness, children's programs, and social justice. His art grew sharper, his urgency louder. He painted through the pain, transforming heartbreak into symbols of hope. On February 16, 1990, at just 31, Keith Haring died of AIDS-related complications. But his message didn't die, it multiplied. Every dancing figure, every heartbeat line, still pulses with the spirit of resistance. In a time of silence, Keith Haring made sure the world listened, through art that never stopped speaking. Liberace wasn't just an entertainer, he was a spectacle. Drenched in diamonds, seated at rhinestone-covered pianos, cloaked in capes under glowing chandeliers, he dazzled audiences with every performance. Born in 1919 to humble beginnings in Wisconsin, he rose from classical prodigy to international superstar, blending musical mastery with flamboyant showmanship. His television specials drew millions, his Vegas shows sold out nightly, and his lavish lifestyle, fur-lined cars, palatial mansions, and bejeweled everything, became legend. But behind the sparkle was a carefully guarded secret. For decades, tabloids speculated about Liberace's sexuality. He denied it fiercely, even suing publications that suggested he was gay. His young chauffeur and alleged partner, Scott Thorson, was publicly dismissed as just a friend. Liberace clung to the illusion, fearing that the truth could destroy the empire he'd built. By the mid-1980s, his appearance changed, gaunt and frail, but he blamed it on crash diets. In truth, he was dying. On February 4, 1987, Liberace passed away at age 67. The official cause? Pneumonia due to AIDS. He died as he lived, shrouded in illusion. But even in silence, his legacy endures. Liberace made the world believe in glamour, even if it never got to truly see the man behind the glitter. Howard Ashman gave Disney its soul. Before princesses sang of dreams and beasts found redemption in love, it was Howard's words that brought their stories to life. As the lyricist behind The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, and Aladdin, he didn't just write songs, he wrote emotions. Every lyric carried longing, wonder, and a quiet ache that made animated characters feel heartbreakingly human. Born in Baltimore in 1950, Ashman first made his mark on Broadway with Little Shop of Horrors. When Disney came calling, their animation studio was struggling. Howard didn't just revive it, he redefined it. Songs like Part of Your World, Be Our Guest, and Friend Like Me became more than music, they became storytelling. But behind the magic, Howard was quietly fighting a devastating battle. Diagnosed with AIDS during the production of Beauty and the Beast, he kept working from his hospital bed, pushing through pain to finish what he started. He died on March 14, 1991, at just 40 years old, months before Beauty and the Beast premiered. The credits carried a tribute to our friend Howard, who gave a mermaid her voice and a beast his soul. Howard Ashman didn't just save Disney. He made us feel again. Rudolf Nureyev didn't just dance. He exploded onto the stage with a force that redefined ballet forever. Born in Soviet Siberia in 1938, he rose from poverty to become one of the most electrifying dancers the world has ever seen. Every leap defied gravity. Every movement shimmered with raw, unfiltered emotion. But Nureyev wasn't just a dancer, he was a revolutionary. In 1961, during a tour in Paris, he did the unthinkable. He defected from the USSR, escaping the KGB at an airport and choosing freedom over fear. Overnight, he became a legend. His partnership with Margot Fonteyn became iconic, blending her poise with his fiery energy. Together, they gave ballet new life, and for the first time, male dancers stepped into equal spotlight. Nureyev lived as boldly as he performed, fierce, unapologetic, and relentlessly passionate. But by the 1980s, whispers of HIV began to follow him. He kept choreographing, directing, and dancing, even as his body weakened. He refused to let illness dim his flame. In 1993, at age 54, Rudolf Nureyev died from AIDS-related complications, but the curtain never truly fell. In every performance that dares to be bold, wild, and beautiful, his spirit lives on. He didn't just dance, he transformed the stage into rebellion. Pedro Zamora wasn't chasing fame, he was fighting for visibility, truth, and love. At just 22, the Cuban-American activist joined the real world, San Francisco, becoming one of the first openly gay and HIV-positive people ever seen on national television. With charm, courage, and quiet strength, Pedro turned reality TV into a platform for change. Diagnosed with HIV at 17, he refused to hide. Instead, he spoke in schools, appeared on talk shows, and educated a generation that had only heard the word AIDS whispered in fear. On screen, Pedro lived openly, falling in love with Sean Sasser in front of millions, culminating in one of television's first same-sex commitment ceremonies. His presence shattered stigma. He wasn't a statistic. He was a brother, a son, a partner, a human face to a crisis too often ignored. As filming ended in 1994, Pedro's health rapidly declined. On November 11th, just hours after the season finale aired, he passed away. He was only 22. President Bill Clinton praised him. Classrooms rewrote health curriculums because of him. Pedro didn't just live with HIV, he changed how the world understood it. In a time of silence, he spoke boldly, and that voice still echoes.